going on, Kaiju United readers, listeners, viewers, however you are tuning in today? I'm here with Chris Yates, the writer of Marcus Walker, Kingslayer Protocol. Chris, for those people that are not familiar with who you are and what you're all about, do you want to give an introduction?
Oh man, what a tee up that is. First off, thank you for having me. This is very exciting. I know we've had a few start and stops to try to get this going, and so to finally have it here, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. But yeah, the kind of big and long story of it all, I guess I'll try and keep it short, is I've always been a huge comics book person ever since the early 90s, kind of growing up with the Batman Returns, the TMNT of it all, and then kind of understanding the Toonami and manga, getting familiar with those types of storytelling from the Japanese culture, and then kind of fast forward to in college, in around 2013, 2012. I was getting a master's or a bachelor's degree in American Studies and film, and I kind of was like, I want to do like comic book movies. I really want to see this through. But at the time, I was also kind of a track and field person with a scholarship, so I was kind of pulled in two directions. And I basically, was like, hey, the bills are getting paid for school for throwing a giant rock and a hammer. Might as well use that. And so I kind of found myself trying to kind of have like a backup plan of like, hey, try and get your schooling paid for. Maybe we'll do film. And then I kind of had a moment in life where my mom got sick, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Not to pivot too hard, but this is the story. And she basically is like, hey, I know you don't want to do coaching. Like, I want you to basically go to Hollywood. Like, you have my blessing. Like, go do what you really want to do. And so I said, okay. And while I was still going through my master's program, I started interning, at video game studios. I interned for Beau Flynn, who is Dwayne Johnson's producing partner. He did Black Adam. And I was like, hey, can I read the script? And he's like, no. And I'm like, in hindsight, probably should have, but that's neither here nor there. And basically, I'm like, hey, my internship's done. Where can I go? And they're like, oh, you can go to an agency. I'm like, cool. Can you get me like an in? They're like, no. I'm like, awesome. So I learned how to take coffee orders and sandwich orders, but that was great. And so basically, I just cold emailed the recruiter at UTA, and I'm like, hey, I'm 29 at the time. I have a master's degree. I know how to take orders, and I want to do comic book movies. And they're like, great, you can start on Monday. And I'm like, great. And so basically, during that time, I kind of made myself known at UTA as the assistant who knew comic books, and I kind of figured out who was the who's who of comics in terms of agents. And then luckily enough, I was able to find that person. And then he introduced me to like Stephen Christie at Boom, and Dynamite and Volt, and kind of these bigger names. And basically it was like, hey, I want to do comic book movies. Stephen Christie's like, great, you have my blessing. And then next thing you know, I'm finding myself signing James Tynion the fourth as an assistant. I'm like, hey, do I get 10%? And they're like, no, we'll hire you. I'm like, cool. Like, that could have set me up a lot better than the
Right.
promotion, but hey, I did that for a year, some years and change. And I met so many wonderful people. Like, I worked for Rick Remender's agent, Frank Miller's agent. Kind of just got very lucky, not to name drop, but just I found myself in a position where Disney decided to give me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And they're like, hey, you're doing this at UTA. You don't really want to be an agent. Would you be wanting to kind of do this, with us? Would you want to be a part of the creative acquisitions team? That's what it was called. And you would be the non-traditional IP person, which means we would want you to review comic books, video games, anything that isn't the kind of obvious choice when it comes to adaptations. So like, not books, not like, screenplays or stage plays, just kind of like, what is the geek thing that we're not looking at that you seem to know what you're doing? And so I was like, oh, okay. So I did that for about a year. And then during my time at Disney, I kind of had, I read about 600 to 700 pieces of IP, or reviewed it, trying to, bring it to Disney. And during that time, I kind of had this moment where I'm like, I really am craving like this Joseph Campbell-esque hero's journey. Like, I really miss those kind of classic, not Disney animated movies per se, but like very much so like there is a message or a lesson in the story of someone, or like the myth, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just disguised as something different. And so I told my boss, and she's like, you can like, you should write something. You should try and figure whatever this is out. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not a writer. I don't know how to do that. And she's like, well, put it down on paper and just figure it out. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, I want to take the writing style, like the hard on your sleeve writing style of Jason Aaron meets like the hard lines of Sean Murphy, but it blends this kind of, manga anime story with Saturday morning cartoons, but as like a comic book. And I want it to be about brothers. It's set in this world of like something. And then so basically I noodled on that. And then Bob Iger was like, hey, we're laying off 7,000 people and we're starting with your department. And I'm like, oh crap. So I need to figure that out. And basically I had kind of like a moment of reflection and I came up with two things. uh what are the two things that I would regret if I were to die, not to be too morbid, but like what would be those life regrets, because I was very lucky to
Mhm.
find myself, I had graduated, I had worked at Disney, like I kind of had done a lot of bucket list things. And then so my two things that I realized was I wanted to marry my girlfriend at the time, and now I am married. And the other one was I wanted to make a comic book. And so I was like, I think I'm going to write that idea. And here we are. And it's from there. And so basically from there, that from basically that moment of realizing I wanted to write a comic book to then promoting it took 3 years. So I had this idea, I kind of put a pitch packet together. I had one artist in mind, and luckily it was the person who I am now collaborating with. His name is Simone Ragazzoni. I discovered his work through I think it was Power Rangers New Dakin, where basically the pink Power Ranger Slayer, if I'm saying it correctly, um, she becomes like her own kind of kick-ass, kind of rebellious, a hero. And I just kind of fell in love with his art, and I was just like, hey man, like here's who I am. Here's like this exact story I just said to you. Would you be interested in creating this story with me? And luckily, his manager, who speaks English, because Simone doesn't speak English, he's Italian, was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we kind of crafted a pitch, took it to some publishers, and fast forward to some kind of starting and stopping again with other publishers, and now coming to realizing we want to do this on our own. And now here we are promoting and kind of drumming the beat, so to speak, of Marcus Walker Kingslayer Protocol, our new Kickstarter comic. That was a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
That was an introduction. We got everything out of the way. We got
All right,
Chris's
cool.
life story. No, I'm just kidding. Um, so let's dive into some of the specifics. So, the
Yes.
first thing that really stuck out to me, when kind of going over some of the story details, and like you said, is that this is a story about two brothers. But was that influenced at all by your own life and your brother, or is that just a story you decided to tell that makes a good narrative, that brotherly bond?
In full transparency, not to air too much my own dirty laundry, but yes, it was 100% a family choice of my own. I basically wanted to, because as you know, you're an intelligent guy. You love comics, you love film, you love
I hope
storytelling.
so.
It's like the best. The best thing is like the things that we attach ourselves are the things that feel the most to us. That connective tissue. And again, I didn't this is my first time writing. This is like, I want to just put myself into this. So, how do I write a story? And again, with my mom being sick and my brother, who is 9 years younger, we had different ways of dealing with grief, and that because he was 16 and I was 25. I think that's how it works out, or I was 26 and he was something like that. And we had very different ways of dealing with grief. And during that process, it was like, at the time, because my family was very much like, I took on that kind of motherly role in terms of like trying to keep the connective tissue together. And it's like, I thought I was doing a good job. I hope I was doing a good job. But then at times, in hindsight, it's like, did I do a good job? Was I wrong? And because, we've had our differences, me and my brother. And so it was kind of me trying to go through the creative process of like, how do I tell a story that is a part of me but is also entertaining to the reader? Like, I don't want to do a slice of life book, because that's just not the type of book I want to read. Nothing against it, it's just not the one I gravitate towards to. And so one of the things that me and my brother always loved was kind of, Saturday morning cartoons and kind of anime. And I mean, I'm a huge Power Rangers guy. Like, that is one of the biggest things between Batman Returns, TMNT, and Power Rangers. Like, I'm showing my age completely, but that is 100% how I got into the mech kaiju kind of, baby's first steps, so to speak. And I was just like, I think I want to kind of make this story. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to write it, but obviously I worked with Simone and we kind of crafted this narrative. And so I really much just wanted to put myself into the story because, as they say, write what you know. And it's like, well, I have some kind of, not juicy because that sounds terrible, but I feel like I have a story I could tell that is somewhat of my family, and I can put it into this kind of big, bombastic, over the top kaiju esque story, mech versus kaiju story that is maybe something a little bit different because as we know with mech stories, usually the main character is the pilot or they see themselves as the pilot. And our main character, Marcus Walker, is not the pilot. He is the little brother to the pilot. And the funny thing is that Marcus doesn't necessarily feel like he is the pilot of his own life. He is the main character, but he doesn't feel like the hero because he thinks his big brother is or his family is, and he's kind of cast aside due to some family dramas. And so I tried to think of like, we always see that. So how could I find a way that it feels like I could do that as a first time creator? And here we are.
A great answer. Sorry to hardball you right out the gate, but
No, no, no,
think that
no. All
I,
please.
I think that really dives into some of the themes too. Um, and side note, bouncing off of you real quick. I just interviewed, by the time this comes out, Eric McEver, who directed Ike Boys, which is like a tokusatsu movie. It's pretty great. But he was saying like the best advice he ever got from his film professors before he became a film professor was make the film that only you can make. And I kind of feel like that translates well into comics. Like you need to
Mhm.
come up with something only you can do. And the story that only you can tell. Like, yeah, there's some, mythology that still goes into storytelling, but the inner layers are like intrinsically Chris, if that makes sense. So I think that's really
Oh,
interesting.
100%. Because I mean, we know the kind of hero's journey, but I wanted to kind of do it a little bit different. I wanted to do my version, like for example, this isn't a spoiler, but it's something I think you may have noticed because through the pages I sent you, I do a lot of things with the eyes because, as we know, the eyes are the window to
Yes.
the soul, and I want it to be connection. So the first page, right, when the first thing you open up with Marcus Walker is that you see the kaiju staring at this civilian, like you see through the civilian's eyes, the kaiju's eyes, and so it's, as you know, kaijus are usually a metaphor for something, right? And so for me, I very much just made it about death, not in terms of like the obvious, like, oh, we're gonna smash and kill and do all that stuff, but it was for me, it was more about grief. And it's like, how do these people process with grief and how do they stare death in the face? So when you eventually read the book, you'll definitely notice that there's a lot of eyes and how Marcus sees things and how people interpret death. And very much just putting myself in it because I mean, it's obvious that death affects us all, but to have it happen to me and my family at such a younger age, it was very impressionable to say the least. So I definitely put like everything I could into that and write this version that I could. Besides, like the metal references I throw in there here and there, and just the little details that you may know from other stories and other things. So yeah, I definitely tried.
I do want to talk about some of the influences real quick because you listed off, TMNT, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, that kind of, 90s stuff. But you also kind of write on the Kickstarter that you guys are massive manga fans. So I know that you have this kind of mythological hero's journey take, but I feel like the story is very classical and mythological, but the visuals are very manga. Of course, with Simone attached. My question to make it short is, are there any specific manga that really spoke to you? Because you mentioned Toonami, but I know that is there any like, man, I just really like Dragon Ball growing up or something like that?
Toonami and mechs, I think has to be Gundam Waltz and Mobile G Gundam, things like that. Those I remember just having those toys as a kid and just being like, Heavy Arms is kick ass. Like I don't know why this giant robot has wings, but it looks cool. And then So I think in terms of like tuna, I mean Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball Z, Trunks was my guy for growing up. It's just staying up way past your bedtime and it's like 2 a.m. and your mom or dad coming in like, what the hell are you doing up? And you're like, I need to see why they're powering up for 2 episodes of filler. Um, but yeah, it was very much those kind of classic Toonami-esque energy. And then if for anime and manga, I think other ones that we reference. I mean, obviously, the Evangelion is a very obvious one. Um, Another one that might be a little different, that may not be the obvious one, is I love Claymore and I love Demon Slayer, just because those are just unique takes on kind of classical, or because like Claymore is like Witcher and Berserk, and then Demon Slayer is kind of like it feels a similar type of version, but through Japanese storytelling. So I think those are the biggest like kind of manga, anime, Japanese influences that I could give you. Yeah, I think those are the
Those
best
are
ones,
solid.
uh, uh, and also like the aesthetics of like let's say Cowboy Bebop, that kind of film grain, the jazz, like kind of like how it all makes the product, or not product, the story feel like something. Like I feel I try to incorporate that because again, even though manga and comics were a huge influence, like music was just as much of an influence on me while I wrote this, because like I love Beartooth, I love Bring Me the Horizon, I love Ice Nine Kills. I kind of love that now modern metalcore, and it's definitely put that because I call it a kinetic sci-fi comic, right? It definitely infused the way I wrote the certain scenes with Simone to be like, hey, I wanted to just be this kind of knockdown brawl, like how do you do this the way you do it? And he's like, I got you. And so yeah, I think kind of that blending of all these influences is what kind of brought us here.
So obviously we're Kaiju United, right?
Yes.
I gotta ask the question, like for readers of Kaiju comics and that kind of mecha comic, what's in it for those guys? Like, what's the big draw besides? I mean, you caught everyone's attention with the big picture, the mech punching that monster in the face. Everyone loved that. But like,
Yeah.
what's really the hook for the kaiju audience that might want to check this out?
It's a great question. I think the best answer is to see how the kaiju world unfolds, because again, I didn't want to do the same kind of pilot main hero type of story. Like we'll get there eventually if we're so lucky to have this, but I think for the kaiju fans, I wanted to kind of create a world that felt lived in. Like as again, I could be wrong, but the ones I've seen is that it's just kind of like you just see the heroes, but you don't see like the civilian day to day. And like for example, with the picture of Marcus at the train station, like he's flipping through his world and it's like you would have like a raid, right? You would have a normal life. You would try to live a normal life, even though they're giant monsters and giant machines. And so we try to kind of position a world of like, what does the average person look like in this world? How could you just have a 9 to 5, but also know that there's like you did kaiju alarm drills or something like that. So for the kaiju like fans, to be very specific, is we definitely have some big bombastic fights, that kind of book in the stories, and how our villain, I won't spoil or how we bring them into it, but what they think is how to fight the kaijus and how to potentially solve the kaiju problem, as it were. They have a very unique take, and that is hopefully one that we will set up for future stories. And so because I didn't want to start a story that I'm sure a lot of people have. It's like, oh, this is how the kaijus came to Earth. It's through a teleporter. They came from this or that. Like, that's been done a lot. And I didn't really want to kind of retract that. So one of the things I heard from Jason Aaron when he was promoting Once Upon a Time at the End of the World was he wanted to write a horror slice of life romance book set in a post-apocalyptic world. And he's like, I want to write this book, but I don't want to talk about the apocalypse. And it's like, I want to write this book, but I don't want to talk about how the kaijus came, at least in this first volume, because people can kind of put two and two together. It's just, hey, this world is just filled with monsters and machines. Just take it what it is for right now, and then we'll get there eventually. Because very much wanted to make it about the characters, and so as they say, you're either a world builder or a character builder. I very much in this first outing found myself to be a character builder because I wanted people to fall in love with Marcus and Caleb and James, who's the general, their father, and and then the cast of characters, Clayton, Mitzi, and Pia, and just like who are they and how do we just make sure this world feels lived in instead of it just being like kind of the beats that maybe like some modern day comics of kaijus and mechs kind of fall into, where it's like you just hit the high notes and that's kind of it, and you don't really dive in deeper. Not to say that I'm the answer, but we at least try to address those things and be like, hey, I want you to care about these people in this version of New Honolulu City. So I hope that
Nice.
answers the question.
It did. Yeah, it totally did. Um,
Okay.
and it's great to get that insight for the kaiju fans because obviously, like, real quick, and this isn't like a
Mhm.
huge quest or anything, but you got you got to market to kaiju mech people and you got to market to comic people. There's some overlap, I would say, but the further you get, the more niche it is. So it's like that happy medium, and it's cool that it seems like you guys have found that, which is really impressive.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, it was all done with, intent and care. Like, how do you blend how do you blend kaiju storytelling and Japanese storytelling as an American? Like
Mhm.
I'm white and indigenous, so I'm not Japanese. I didn't feel comfortable writing a Japanese story, and my creator is Italian. And like I wanted to give that respect. So that's why we set it in Honolulu, because that's America's version of Japan. You know what I mean? So that's like, how do you do not, Honolulu in a world where it feels like Hawaii is succeeding, and it kind of has this futurism that doesn't feel, it feels 5 minutes into the future, not 100 years into the future. And so, we kind of set it in this world like, hey, we want it to make it feel like it's a blending of cultures. And I know it might seem obvious, but it was one built on respect for both mediums and both cultures and how we blend it. Like, for example, one of the funny things was we have a thing called the K rave, but then eventually, because kaiju rave, basically people get to dress up as their favorite kaiju, their favorite mech person, their machine. Let your freak flag fly, because I don't want to show my age too much, but it's like I know there's like emo night, there's Shrek rave, there's all kinds of dancing things. So I incorporated that into the story. And then the funny thing was, I wrote it as K Rave. It was the K Rave, Kaiju Rave. Very, very original, I know. But the funny thing is that Simone wrote it as Crave. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because what do people do when they go out? They crave a night out. Like they crave, a party. So I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, that's a happy accident. And so then that's kind of like the fun kind of kaiju thing that we try to incorporate. And like also, as we all know from the internet videos, when you're on it too much, you just see things, and it's like, how cool would it be if we had like a kaiju face filter on a cat video? And Simone's like, I hate it, but I love it. So it's just one of those things of like, what are those day to day life things that would infuse kaiju in a real way where it's not like overly obvious? You know what I mean? Like, here's a kaiju toy or this, which we all love, but we've all seen those. So it's like, how do we incorporate kind of like that day to day life?
Yeah.
That's just slightly different. So
That could be a whole rabbit hole. Um, wow. Yeah, and that's it's kind of cool to be organic with it too, because like that stuff would happen if we had the big monsters in this world. There'd be memes everywhere. The internet gets kind of dark. So,
well,
there'd
I
be
mean,
some of
also
that.
like in like Independence Day, when we like the movie from the 90s, it was like, when they
Yeah.
found out aliens were real, they all had parties on the top of skyscrapers. And I'm like,
Yeah.
huh, like, yeah, that's something you would do. I mean, not a
Yeah.
smartest thing to do, but it is something some people would do.
It would happen. Yeah. So diving a little deeper into some of the more themes and whatnot of the book.
Yeah.
So you're on the Kickstarter again. This is kind of the frame of reference for people that are looking at your book. Um, you say that this book has stakes, but on the flip side, there's stakes, but the book is really for fans of Big Hero 6, Ultraman Rising, Power Rangers. Would you say the book is more like young person friendly, like from your time at Disney? Or would you say that it's for everyone? There's just real stakes, kind of like in young people media from yesteryear, where things were serious in kids' movies back then. Does that make sense?
I absolutely, and that's a great question. I think it's the latter if I have to give an honest answer because I mean, I show my hand. I loved Disney movies. That's why I kind of went there. But um, I just feel like I'm kind of tired of movies or TV shows or media talking down to kids and be like, like you're this, you're that, blah blah blah. And it's like I hated that crap. So why would I like as a kid like I watched things I shouldn't have watched. I love things that treated me as an equal, and so I very much went into the mindset of like I don't want to talk down to Marcus. You know what I mean? I want people to feel like they either connect with Caleb or Marcus or whoever in the story, but I wanted them to feel like this is talking to them and not down at them. Because specifically with that, what I just said, we have different versions of that in the comic. And we kind of go back to these things because Marcus is like 5'5" compared to most people, so they would call him a short king or whatever you say. But it's like he's 16. He's 16. Like he's average height for a 16-year-old. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. But it's very much to how do people, how do young people, how do family members, how do kind of like mentor figures talk to young people? And I really wanted to try and articulate that with Simone as best I could because I feel like kids kids entertainment or young people entertainment, I feel like could use some not handholding. Like again, we don't do anything completely vile or vulgar or anything like that, but like I loved Indiana Jones Temple of Doom because it was like, holy crap, like that dude's heart just came out of his chest or his face just melted. And I kind of love that almost like PG-13 straddling the line where it's like you don't you like there's some blood but there's not a lot. There is some cursing but not like there's no f bombs. And so I basically wanted to be like, how do you push that envelope of real stakes in life where it's like if you make the wrong decision you could die. And one of the things with streaming and comics that I feel like we all have kind of gotten used to for a bad part is that this person's not going to be in real stakes because there's season two already announced or there's season three. And it's like, I want to write this in real time with my audience as best I can and collaborating with Simone because it's like, we had 12 issues. We condensed it to six. And so the first Kickstarter is issue one and two combined in a giant premium size version. And we have an idea of where we want it to go, but if fans like it or don't, we want to kind of pivot as accordingly. But we want them to feel like anything could happen. You don't know if certain people are going to make it to the next issue or not, or why they would happen. So to answer that question, I think it's very much we just want it to be real. Like we want you to feel like, yes, we would love to make Marcus as long as we possibly can, but we also don't want to hold your hand and say like everything's going to be a-okay because that's a lie and that's not real life. And I know it's comics, but I tried to put as much of myself and our team into that as much as we could.
Pops up, at least for me, and that's two camps, right? One of them says this is a love letter, unabashed, just a love letter to this. The other side has said, yeah, there's influences. I wouldn't call this a love letter. I would call this, I would like it to stand amongst other works in the genre. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? Like,
Absolutely.
there's totally different camps in these creative works. Where do you fall?
I think the most honest answer is I th- so here's how I can answer it, and I can kind of tie the music element into it. When bands promote their new album, they're like, "What do you think about this album?" You're like, "Oh, it's our best work ever," and it's like, are you just saying that because that's your new album, or do you really feel that? And it's like one of the things I love when some bands are saying it's like, "You tell me." Like I think it is a love letter and I would love for it to stand on its own, but that's maybe not my call. Like I tried my best with my team to create something unique. I mean, every story's kind of been done at some point or some variation. And we are taking a creative swing where we're pitching it as like a mech versus kaiju inspired comic where our main character isn't a pilot. So it's like that's a swing, but it's not the biggest swing, but at the same time, we are trying to do something different. So I think it is a love letter. I would love for it to stand on its own, but I think that's something I can't decide. That is something I feel like once people read it, they will be able to make that decision for themselves. Because I can be like, it's gonna stand on its own or this, and it's like, no, it maybe not. Because it's my take. I wrote it. I'm biased, you know. But all I can say is that I just had so much love and respect for these genres and for these titles that I wanted to be a part of it because I hold them in such high regard. And if I should be even within the hemisphere of them, we should be so lucky. If that, I hope that's an okay answer.
That's a great answer, and it's a unique answer because, like I said, I've heard one or the other. I've never heard somebody say the audience will decide. So that's very real. That's very I respect the hell out of it, quite frankly.
Oh, thank you.
Um, I've talked to a lot of comic book creatives, and a lot of them do hire artists that don't speak English. So I want to know from your perspective and end of things when working on Marcus, what that collaboration process across the language barriers like. Like obviously you have the manager, but like what else goes into that?
That's a great that's a great note. And I think the very honest and real life answer I can give you is, as I said, so I had been dating the woman, my girlfriend at the time, for about a year. And the thing with her is she's Quebecois, so she's French Canadian, so she's French is her first language. I do not speak French. I don't speak any other language besides smartass. And so I am very much just like, we have that connection of like, luckily she's very intelligent and she speaks multiple languages because that's Quebecois do. And I had to basically, when we first started dating, learn how to translate things. And so basically between my girlfriend and my collaborator, it was very much like a lot of like Google Translate, DeepL Translate, I mean like, hey, um, here's what I'm thinking and hope it translates. And then Enzo, his manager, would translate it just to make sure. But then we kind of got in a rhythm where I would write the script because we'd like, hey, here's what we're thinking. This is what we discussed. I'll write it down. But for Simone, he asked me to do, he wanted the panels written in a different color. So how we did it on my script was I would write the panels or the script breakdown in red, and then I would do the dialogue in black, and then the sound effects or the onomatopoeias in blue. So for him, he would just take all the red text and then make that translate it into Italian. And then I'm like, hey, this is a roadmap. This isn't a blueprint, you know, like you do you. I'm not here to dictate you how to draw. Like we worked on the script together, but this book sings because it's your artistry. So I don't want to get in your way. Like I'm not a micromanager. So I basically said like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I tried my best to put a cinematic eye to it. But I'm like, if you think it's terrible and you want to rearrange it and do it how even better, go for it, man. And so luckily, I mean, in full honesty, I think in the past 3 years, me and Simone have never gotten a fight. I think we've maybe had one back and forth between like not even disagreement, but just like, well, what do you mean? No, like, what do you mean? You know, like kind of just like the misunderstanding. And then it was
Yeah.
very much like the manager being like, oh, this is what he means because of it's in it like the Italian meaning is different versus the English. I was like, oh yeah, we'll go with his. His is much better. Like, yeah, of course. I wish we would have gone there. So I think that's the best way of just having extra patience and just being like letting your creative partners do what they do best and not like micromanaging them because I mean, you've seen the pages; they look gorgeous. Like I couldn't have told him to do that great work besides the panel descriptions I wrote. Like I gave him a very minimalistic version of like this is what I'm thinking for the panel. You do you, and I think 9 times out of 10 it always came out better because he did his own version of it.
I like that. That's a good insight. Um, all right, I did want to talk just a little bit about the Kickstarter because it's
Yes.
kind of why you're here, right? And this might be a silly question, but I'm not really familiar with like the inner workings of the comic industry and stuff.
Yep.
Um, a lot of variant covers, like as an incentive, lots of them. Is that a common thing, Or is that one of your big selling points for the Kickstarter is you can get all these cool different covers?
So for the comic book industry, I think variants are a very common thing because it is a way to kind of inflate numbers. Like it's the kind of like we all know it, we all acknowledge it, and it's just we kind of bend the knee to it because you want to see people do different things and you want to see cool stuff. Like who doesn't? But I was very me and Simone, I'll say that. Me and Simone were very specific in how we wanted to do our covers because I can say very intently that everything, the campaign, the storytelling, every single piece of this campaign was thought of with intent, direct, and specifically. So we have 5 covers, I think. Yes, 5 actual covers you can actually buy outside of the digital one. So the digital cover is a variant. That's not the A cover. It's an homage to Sean Murphy's Tokyo Ghost, and then we have Simone's A cover. And then we have a cover by Sean Murphy, Rob Gilroy, Sia Oyam, and Kevin Keane. All of those creators are friends of mine. So Sean, I used to work with at UTA, and then I kind of told him about this endeavor, and I would listen to every single podcast he did because I would always find like a nugget. I mean, again, podcasts, as you know, could be either filled with just kind of BS, kind of back and forth, which is perfectly fine. But every now and then, Sean would drop these nuggets, and I would just be like, ooh, I'm going to keep that. And so I just kind of became friendly with him. And then when I told him about this endeavor, he's like, if you need a cover, we'll figure out a deal. Like let's figure something out where we can both win from this. And because he's like, I'd love to help you out. And so that's kind of how Sean came on board. And then with Rob Gilroy, I was listening to a podcast by David Harper, who runs Sketched or Off Panel, and it was just I was driving from Long Beach to Beverly Hills, where my office was in Disney, which sounds so pretentious, but it is what it is. And it was Rob on his podcast, and I just reached out to Rob and like, dude, I love Farmhand. I think you're great. And then that's how we kind of became friendly and how I got a cover. And then I worked with Sia. I introduced her to Sean, and then Kevin Keane is actually going to be a collaborator for my next project, my horror project with him that should be coming next, or at least in the future. So, yes, we have some comic collectible variant covers, but we didn't want to go over the top. Like we wanted to be respectful to people's wallets. We're not here to kind of, give me your money. Like everything is very intent. Like
Mhm.
we don't have metal or foil or T-shirts or keychains. Not to say those are bad, but I don't buy those things. So I don't expect our potential backers or fans to buy those things. We very much wanted it to be about the story. And if you like all these people that we believe in and are friends of ours, we're going to offer those things to you. And if you really believe in it, we'll offer it to you guys at a discounted price. Well, because for example, another thing we're doing is the artist edition, which, as we said, is a big fans of manga. So our artist edition is the only version where you can get Sean Murphy's cover in black and white. And it's also going to have Simone's halftones. So when you look at it, it's going to read and look like a manga, but it'll be, it'll be an English side reading. So all of that to be said, we were very purposeful in our variant covers and kind of our reward tiers because we just didn't want to overdo it. Like people have people's attention, people's are scattered across multiple streaming devices, video games, life, and their wallets too. And so we just kind of wanted to be respectful to that because it's like, again, if I won't buy it, I can't expect other people to buy it either. So
I like the honesty. I really do. The honesty is
of
great.
course.
Um, Man, that really dove into everything I had about the Kickstarter. You're so great.
Thank
Um,
you. I've had a lot of practice to try and make sure I say things that aren't too rehearsed, but I at least kind of have an easier recall to be able to like talk about it in a
yeah,
fun way.
yeah, for sure. And I think we're doing a I think we're doing a good job. Like we're kind of promoting the book, but we're still like
Yeah.
actually getting insight from you, which is great.
Well, and that's not to hit on it too much, but like I got my master's in coaching and I genuinely love helping people. And it's like,
Mhm.
if I can do this, you can. Like truthfully, like outside of like the whole bells and whistles of what I did for the Kickstarter, the actual doing of the comic, like it just took time. it just took longer than I had anticipated. Like, this version of Marcus is my favorite version, and this is the one I'd be happy to die over if I'm using the recall from how I said I want to make a comic book before I die. This is the thing I'm happy for. If other people feel like they want to do that, I think they can. And if they should, because I don't know what's going to happen with Marcus. Hopefully, it funds and we can do more books and we can kind of have this wonderful moment with fans and create something for themselves and for us. But I say all that to be like, if you want to do this, just like you wanted to talk about kaijus and you wanted to build this, a place where you felt, a sense of community. And it's like, you should try that. You should do that. And so if I can share anything that I've learned to, your audience and your readership, it's like, I'm happy to be an open book and just be like, I will tell you everything I can because I've found myself in a position where I've worked at UTA, I've worked at Disney, I've met a lot of higher level people, and I've worked with some high level people, and some people are just like, how the hell did you do that, or what is it about this, or what about that? And it's like, if I can help or share, like, I'd be happy to. So
We are a kaiju website, so before we wrap things up, I want to know what you, Chris, enjoy about kaiju. What do you enjoy about Godzilla or other kaiju centric franchises? What about it speaks to you?
I think, to me, and please don't lambast me because I'm not the I don't, I maybe have the wrong answer, but to me, truthfully, I feel like kaiju and mech stories, but specifically kaiju stuff, because when you say that, it immediately takes me back to being like 5 years old, I think it was, when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie came out. And I had all those toys, or I would see, the giant eyeball man or Goldar, or things like that, where it's just like, this is awesome. Like, it's this kind of youthful spirit of just like, wow. And again, looking back, it's, men in poorly made suits and things like that. But it was real to us then. And it feels like the most authentic way because it's like it is what it is, and that's the beautiful thing. Like, it doesn't need to be, it can be high art, but it can be what it is or what the creators want it to be. I mean, Ultraman Rising, like, good God, you try and not cry at the end of that movie, but then you realize what it means about family in a father and son dynamic and passing the torch kind of to your children. And so I think there's this kind of like family, wistful, whimsical nature to it that I just think is so fun and just kind of exciting. I mean, it can be dramatic and it can be, I mean, it can be pretty brutal and dark and bleak, but for me, I think it's the fun, whimsical nature of it that reminds me of youth. And I don't want to say happier times because I'm happier. I'm happy now, but it's just kind of not nostalgia either because it still lives with me. I'm 36 years old and I'm talking about kaiju stuff still, but I think it just has this kind of special place in my heart where it's like, this is a part of your youth and this is what built you into the storyteller that you are. And so I think that's the best way I can explain it. There's not a direct answer, but it's very much this kind of youthful spirit where it's like, wow, that's so cool. And I hope that's what we can impart onto Marcus and to other people. So I hope that's not corny.
For the record, there is no wrong answer. There
Okay,
is
good.
not. There's no wrong answer because we all, not to like get up and do my Optimus Prime speech or anything, but
Please.
we all enjoy this media one way or another. It all shapes our lives in different way. There is the nostalgia, there is the escapism, there's the artistry, there's the mythology behind monsters dating thousands of years. I've heard so many different takes. There's no wrong answer in how you enjoy these things, and I don't know if the community would like me saying this, but I can say it. Um, Kaiju extends beyond just the big guy. It's
Yeah.
more than like, Godzilla is the big one, but you have giant monsters and Power Rangers. You have Ultraman Rising. You have all these different ways to tell the same story, but with these creatures. So there's no wrong
Hydra in the
answer.
mythology, the Titan.
Yeah,
Those
Greek
are, I know, you know
mythology.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, the world serpent in Norse mythology. Like, they're everywhere. There's stories about monsters that have existed for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And kaiju, I think, are a version of that. Kind of like, I don't know, I like Marvel Comics and DC Comics. Superhero stories are like Hercules, you know, it's just
Yep.
a different mythology. And I think that's really cool.
Yep.
Not
Yeah.
to soapbox, I know this is about you, but
No, 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 no. That is exactly the intent. I mean, I love mythology and I love all those stories because that's, in my opinion, how you learn and how you grow and how you know not make mistakes, you know, and that's how our before the internet kids, as we all know, like that's how it was passed down. And so to hopefully be someone who can help contribute to that tale or that tapestry that is, you know, comics and kaijus, then I should be so lucky.
well said. Well, Chris, my final question to you.
Yes.
We've kind of talked all about Marcus Walker, the themes, the Kickstarter, the influences. We talked about you. I just want to know two things. One, I want to know if there's anything else that Kaiju United should know about the book, its upcoming Kickstarter, where to find the latest on Marcus Walker, like how to follow what you guys are doing. Um, yeah, we'll start there.
Yeah. So no, I don't have anything to add except that again to kind of close out. Thank you again for being a genuinely good human, Jacob. I mean,
Thank
you've
you.
process. Like we've been friendly now for a few years, just kind of, you know, you answered an email of mine and were so kind. And then to see it now kind of become this thing and have this conversation with you is just, I really do appreciate it. And I can't say enough kind things. And I'm not trying to be, you know, blow smoke or anything like that. I truly mean it because you don't have to do this for me. You don't have to do what it is you do for your community. You just do this because you love it. And I just want you to know that I see you, I acknowledge you, and I'm just very grateful that you have given me an opportunity to talk to the thing that you have built because I respect the hell out of it. And so I don't have anything to add, but if people want to follow Marcus Walker Kingslayer Protocol, please pre-save the Kickstarter campaign. If you want to follow along on socials, you can. Mine is CYG47. That's kind of the handle for almost all platforms. And if you want to check out Simone, please check out. I think it's Simone Ragazzoni on all social platforms. And yeah, I'm very excited to get this book out into the world. And it is going live March 3rd.
Thank you again for sitting down with me. Very full circle moment for you and I, in terms of the development of Marcus Walker, but also just a fun talk. It was really nice.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. This is. I can't wait to hopefully do this again for the next iteration of Marcus, and then you can kind of see and talk and whatever spoilers or non spoilers. But again, this has been super fun, and I'm just very grateful for the time.